And we are live for episode 8 back in Adelaide after a couple of weeks of travel. Must say it's good to be home. Very good to be home. Now, what I normally do for my guests is I generally do a bit of a rundown on them and introduce them. But I think the power of this podcast is going to be your story, bro, and how you tell it. So today's going to be a little bit different. I'm going to hand straight over to you. And I want you to tell me your story, how we sort of got here and yeah, who you are.
Yeah, okay. Well, thanks first. First of all, thanks very much for having me here, Sam.
Yeah.
My name's
welcome.
Gabe, and I basically lost my arm to an infection in late 2020.
Just try and go a little bit closer to the mic, bro.
A little bit closer.
There you go. Yep.
There you go. Late 2020, I lost my arm to an infection. Now, the lead up to this was that I was an engineering student, doing quite well, partying at the same time and kind of living my best life and getting excited about the fact that I was about to finish and go into the professional world. And I'm not super superstitious, but I did say to myself, shit, like I'm about to finish my degree, something's going to happen. And then I was in the gym doing a bicep curl, snapped my right bicep off the elbow. It was like receding up my arm, rushed straight to the hospital. My friend rushed me straight to the hospital and was sent home. The day after, I had the rupture repaired. And that's a routine surgery, you know. That's an everyday thing. But then things get complicated, right? So my memory from that point is gone, shot. I remember going to the Calvary when I first tore it, but then from then on, I don't remember anything until I woke up 2 weeks later. And what had happened is, for 3 days after the surgery, I had been basically showing signs of infection. My friends had called me. I was delirious.
So you're at home this time?
I was actually at my partner's house at the time.
Okay, yeah. So you went in for surgery and then you came home and there was signs of infection.
Yeah. You know, like my whole arm was purple and swollen. And like, you know, I've had quite a few bouts with the hospital and near-death experiences from other weird health things before, and it was enough to concern me. But again, because the infection had kind of taken over my head so much, I wasn't able to kind of make those phone calls and insist that I needed help straight away. So a locum came out and he said, just keep an eye on it. Not much at all. And then a second locum came and said, shit, you've got to go straight to hospital. This is really, really bad.
What was the time spread between the two doctors coming, one saying that you're all right, the next one saying, shit, we got to do something?
I think it was, from what I understand to have happened, because I don't remember it, was about 24 hours, I think. And I know, without giving too many details, there was some things said after the fact by one of the first doctors that are not being said anymore. But, sorry, bro, sure. Yeah, right. Yep, that better. Yeah. Anyway, long story short, they came out, said, off to hospital with you, and jumped in an ambulance straight to hospital. I don't remember this trip. The next thing I remember was waking up 10 days later.
Shit.
Yeah. And the thing is, when I woke up 10 days later, because I had... So the infection was called necrotizing fasciitis. So it's basically just the infection basically seeded during the operation and just spread, and it was necrotic. So it was just killing all the flesh, killing all the healthy cells.
Yeah, I've just got a bit of a review here on it. It's a serious bacterial infection that destroys tissue under the skin. Flesh-eating disease occurs when bacteria enter the body through a break in the skin. So obviously your surgery.
Yeah.
And then people with a weakened immune system can be at greater risk of developing this condition. So yeah, that was just something I had on Google there to give the listeners a bit of dexterity on the situation.
That's helpful. It's hard for me to articulate properly what happened.
Yeah.
And so basically I woke up. When I went in, I was 99 kilos, pretty lean. Like I was always loved the gym my whole life. So I was big and as I told you before, I've been training to box. Mm-hmm. And I always want a passion. I think one of these people, like I want to chase something all the time. And I was a bit deluded because I was too big and too slow to ever actually be a good boxer. But I was having a crack at it anyway.
Yeah.
And then I woke up and by the time I came to, I was 70 kilos.
Shit. So you lost 29 kilo.
Complete deconditioning. And it was a scramble. But initially I had kind of, my arm was in an aeroplane splint, so it was held out to the side. And because even still today I have really serious phantom pain, it hurt, but I didn't know it was gone. Mm-hmm. And the surgeon came in and they said, look, you had an infection, we had to remove this part and this part, but they never used the word amputation. Right? And the woman I was with at the time had said, do you want me to tell you what had happened? I said, no, I want to hear it from the surgeon. It wasn't that, like I could have just heard it from her and known that I'd lost my arm. But anyway, 3 days later, I looked in the mirror and bam, my arm's missing.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that's what I was expecting to see in the mirror. And it was kind of, it should have been a really sobering moment. But because I was pumped full of every drug under the sun that the hospital had on stock, there was no clarity there. And more than anything, it was confusing because I didn't have this response to this major life event that I should have had if I had had a clearer head.
Yeah. Did you almost feel like you're in a bit of a nightmare?
Yeah.
Yeah,
big time. But it was almost like I knew it was real. And the nightmare part of it is that I couldn't figure out where or what had happened, and because I don't remember going to the hospital and why the fuck has this happened? I just tore my bicep.
Yeah.
And then so basically what happened is that they had to remove all the tissue. They did 11 major surgeries over that time.
Wow.
Because it basically just kept spreading. My dad's calling my friends up saying Gabe's going to die. And it very much looked that way for a long time.
Yeah, I was just about to ask that. Was there a percentage factor on that? What they were giving. Obviously, they were giving some information to your dad, and your dad was calling for your friends, right? Because there might have been a chance.
Yeah.
Was there a percentage chance on you actually dying from this?
Numerically, not that I'm aware of, but because of how aggressive the infection was, they were genuinely worried that I was going to die. Like it was by no means a safe bet to keep chopping me up and getting rid of things. And so, they first chopped my arm below the elbow, kept spreading, and then above the elbow, and then they had to remove all of the tissue basically on my residual limb, on my chest, armpit, a little bit up my neck.
Is this obviously because the infection's spreading?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so they basically just had to get rid of it to leave only healthy skin. And then they used a really weird, fantastic piece of medical equipment. It's called BTM. It's basically a double-layered prosthetic skin that they put on top of flesh, like basically uncovered flesh, and you have to spend the next 4 to 6 weeks growing into it, basically. So it starts off and it's like a crumpled bag.
So it's like a synthetic skin,
basically.
Essentially.
Yeah.
Okay.
And once you've filled it out, so over the 4 or 6 weeks when I filled it out and it became kind of taut, it was like a crumpled bag stuff with taut, they said, all right, well, now it's time for this thing's covered in hundreds of staples, and they had to do dressing changes all the time. It was horrific every step of the way.
Yeah. Like pain, that would have been really painful, those changes, right?
Oh yeah. Every step of it was painful, and I stopped taking painkillers really early on too because
was that just like a personal decision?
2 reasons. One, I felt I developed a disability complex overnight, basically, being worried about being helpless or being dependent on other people.
Yeah.
But then the other side of it was that, sorry. Repeat your question again, sorry.
Oh, was it just a personal decision that that you didn't want to be on the meds?
So I was disabled, and I didn't want to be disabled in the head because that moment when I first saw it and I couldn't compute it properly, looking in the mirror, was the moment that I was like, okay, well, now it's time to get off these drugs because I need to be able to deal with this and rehab without being hampered by drugs.
Yeah, because you don't want your mind to go. You want to be. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, big time. And I suppose, and the other thing is that I wanted to get the fuck out of the hospital as fast as possible.
Yeah.
And I knew that the less drugs you're taking, the less things they're monitoring, they have less reasons to keep you in.
Yep.
Which actually worked because they let me out on day release a month or two before they said they were going to. Mm-hmm. I think they all got sick of me. I don't want this. I want to get up. I want to walk. I want to do this. And, and I'm in hospital saying, someone get me a chin-up bar so I can have on the bed. But I just wanted to get back to training.
Yeah.
But I couldn't get any calories in.
Yeah. So were you obviously struggling to take in food as well because your body's trying to fight off the infection?
Well, there was actually a secondary issue that happened from it. It was called an esophageal stricture. So basically, when I was in coma, the way I understand it is 1 in every 3 people you meet have pretty serious reflux issues. Mm-hmm. I happen to be one of those 3 people. And my stomach acid ran up my esophagus and scarred it and constricted it.
Yep.
And so when I woke up, it was 2 millimeters wide the whole way down. And so I couldn't even drink a glass of water. So I was basically sustaining myself on tiny, tiny sips of red Powerade and cheese and bacon balls that I basically let dissolve in my mouth and could swallow. And that's all I could do.
And then obviously they have IV drips and stuff like that in to keep your fluids up and that. But there's really no substitute for actual food and water.
No. And it's just like, all the calories I was getting in were all fat and sugar. And I'm not doing anything.
Yeah.
I'm lying in bed. Like I need calories to recover. I need but like I'm used to a high protein diet and moving all the time. So I'd lost all this muscle, but then I went down this road of kind of becoming skinny fat.
Yeah.
And it just sent me worse and worse. That problem wound up in 12 procedures where they basically just put a tube down and they'll put a tube a millimeter wider every time just to stretch it
slowly,
out.
Slowly stretch it out to get it to an adequate level.
So I couldn't eat steak for 6 months.
Yeah.
And that was, obviously recovery process is really hard, but then not being able to eat and fuel properly to recover was impossible. Like, got into my head really badly because all I wanted to do is a physical rehab.
And I'm trying to put myself in your shoes, but it's very, very hard, right? But I could only just imagine from someone that is very, very fit, very, very healthy, was moving all the time, eating the right things, training a lot, to go from someone that can't move, can't eat. The mental game of that as well is just uncomparable from the average person. Like not even I can compare to that, right? In stuff that I've done. It's what an incredible story to sit here and hear it. To sit here and get it firsthand. Yeah. It's pretty amazing. What were you? So your initial reaction after sort of getting up and then getting through that initial stage of okay, this has sort of happened now. I'm now off the pain meds. What was that next few months like and trying to rebuild back? Were you mentally sort of said, okay, right, I'm dealing with this now and this is going to be my life going forward, but I'm going to be a better person from it? Or did you still struggle for the initial months mentally?
For the initial months, I did not struggle mentally because not so much that it wasn't so much that this was going to be my life going forward, but that my whole life had always had something in it that I was passionate about. Mm-hmm. boxing with one hand, not interested in that anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I've always been a big dude in the gym. I didn't think that was possible anymore.
Yeah.
And I was sitting around thinking, what am I going to do? But then the other part was I couldn't get any calories in. So yeah, I wanted to go for runs. I wanted to do this stuff, but I just couldn't fuel for it. So it was this point where I really had to just sit down and go, right, you've got one task, and that's to get better. You know, before they did a skin graft, so that material goes on, and the skin graft happens 6 weeks later. So I had a vacuum machine attached to me for 6 weeks, pulling out all the negative tissue. And so my main goal was just get better.
Yeah.
Get moving. You know, the range of motion in my arm was this.
Yeah, okay.
And so I had to break through all the scar tissue to get it back going properly.
Yeah.
And
that would have been tough.
It was very painful. The rehab team said, you know, this is going to take, 6 to 8 weeks. And I did it in like a week.
Yeah, nice.
Because like, I know why they said 6 to 8 weeks. They got a lot of pain, but pain's now a new part of like an integral part of my life, and I just got to make friends with it.
Yeah.
So move on.
Yeah.
So I attacked it, went to the public health kind of rehab, and they got sick of me too, because that's just like, they're surrounded by lots of people with lower limb loss, people that have diabetes, people that are overweight, people that just don't really have much drive to get going again, and just kind of like they're there because they have to be there.
Yeah, they're not really taking care of highly motivated individuals like yourself.
No, not at all.
So you wanting to push your boundaries on things, and they were probably getting a bit annoyed at that.
Yeah, I'm saying I want to do, if I can't, I said, what can I do at home? They said, you can't do anything. I said, all right, I'll be here 5 days a week. They hated it.
Yeah. Fuck them though.
Yeah, exactly. And then at the moment, I started playing golf.
Yeah.
While I was in rehab.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I just need to do something. I need skill acquisition. I need to do something.
Yeah.
And then they found out that I was playing golf and basically told me that I didn't need rehab anymore because I was playing golf.
Like golf's a fucking...
Yeah. I was shit at it too, by the way.
Do you still play now?
Look, I haven't played for a long time.
Yeah.
I put quite a lot of effort into it, and the club face control is really, really difficult.
Mate, I try and play golf with two arms, and I'm terrible at it.
What's the hardest sport in the world?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So what an idea if someone one arms to go, oh, I'm going to try and golf.
Yeah.
So
but that's the mentality that you seem that you have, right? Nothing's really unconquerable now to your mind.
Yeah.
Has that always been you, or did you have to go through your surgery to have that mental strength?
So it's kind of interesting. I was thinking about this a little bit. When I was young, I played soccer for a bit. I got a really bad injury, was on crutches for 9 months. And then so my sporting interest died. Sports weren't a big thing in my household. Both my parents are academics. And so I remember... I had muscle wastage in my legs, so I didn't really walk properly. That was kind of the end for sport to me. And then swimming carnivals started popping up, and I've always loved training. I probably didn't realise it at this point, but I used to go to the pool and train and swim regularly to get ready for the swimming. I used to win all the swimming carnivals in primary school.
Yeah.
And that was great. But then high school came and everything just kind of fell away, and I just didn't do anything healthy.
Yeah.
Until 16 or 17 when I started doing Muay Thai and back at it again. I was training 5-6 days a week, loving it. So in this period of my formative teenage years, I had somehow omitted this part of me which was passionate and wanted to train and be productive. And so it kind of wasted a whole lot of years because of that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Yeah, because, from what I'm hearing is that you've always needed something to keep you on the straight and narrow, whether it be soccer early, whether it be swimming, and then Muay Thai. So there's always been something for you that has sort of kept you. And if you don't have that sort of stuff, you might go off the rails a little bit. Is that true in saying that?
Oh yeah, big time.
Yeah, okay. Isn't that interesting? Especially for young males, I think it's super important for them to have something, whether it be footy, whether it be Muay Thai, grappling, boxing, running. I think for young men especially, it's really, really important in their formative years to play some type of physical sport. It doesn't have to be a team sport. It can be golf. You know, even that, even something that just occupies their brain, gets them moving, and gives them targets and goals to set towards. I think that's very, very important for young males. Obviously, I can only speak for males. All right. The female side of things, I think is completely different. But for young males, and it sounds like you have always needed something like that.
Big time. Yeah. It's something that, like, even down to my hand-eye coordination, I just didn't develop it properly because I didn't play enough sports growing up. And at the point of my brother actually got really sick when I was 10 and he had brain surgery. And that kind of derailed the whole family a little bit, right? And so there was, although the intention of my parents was that I played sports and I do this, things just got too much to deal with everything. So that all got sidelined and other less healthy things took its place.
Yeah. As sometimes happens when you're a young teenage boy. You need to find stuff to do.
Yeah,
I think, I always had footy growing up, which was really, really good. And then straight from there, I joined the army. But I had a lot of friends in the army that were real rat bags of kids. Even some that had been in juvie and stuff like that sort of joined the army to get outside that world.
Yeah. It's always been a thought in my head, especially going through engineering, being like, you should just go to the army because I've always known that structure is good for me and having something to train for and do these things would have been a good choice.
Yeah, it gives you routine as well, gives stability in your life. Talking to one of my friends on the podcast last week, he joined the army and he loved it because it gave him routine.
Yeah.
And he's kept that routine to this day. Where
he sounds like he was born for that.
Yeah, he was. Easily. And I think we were talking about before and about the podcast and how you enjoyed it. But yeah, he's easily one of the hardest, toughest dudes to do it, in my opinion. You know, he was just a real tough, hard guy, but and he was a bit of a rat bag growing up as well. But putting routine in his life was important for a young male, right? He was really good at footy and stuff like that. Used to be off the rails a bit, but routine was key for him in that type of situation. Now, I just want to sort of jump back to it a bit. After that initial period of you sort of back in playing golf and in that rehab, how long was your rehab process, or does it ever stop? Like, are you still in a constant rehab phase?
Interesting question. Okay, so the golf would have happened. So this was I woke up November 23rd, I think, of 2020. I was taken into hospital for a skin graft to take all this shit off me on New Year's Eve. Right, so it was almost 6 weeks. And then at that point, it was like, that's when I was allowed to go to the QEH rehab.
Yep.
And that only lasted a week or two until I found someone privately who was really invested in what I was doing. And it was an emotional thing for me because all I'd heard so far were basically crickets and going, do less. And I had someone go, you want to do something? Oh, let's help you.
Yeah, let's get stuck into it.
And that was kind of like, similarly as an adult, when I realised that I hadn't had all these ball skills acquired and I wanted to do lots of different stuff, it was a new thing for me because I had to learn how to use my left hand for everything. And so I thought, what's a better way to do it than to try a whole bunch of different sports and do different things like that, right? So the rehab, back to the question, is the rehab probably lasted, I suppose there's levels of it, but like really intense rehab probably only lasted maybe 2 months after I got out of rehab from the hospital. But it's kind of continuous in the fact that, like, obviously I train hard. Like, I'm a track cyclist and I'm a track cyclist sprinter, which is heavy load on the body. Everything's asymmetrical. Everything gets twisted. Nothing complies in the way that it should properly. So, like, I need to see my physio every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
To make sure that things aren't completely ruined.
Yeah. Because I could even imagine, stuff like not having an arm there, right, and then that arm to swing off, like those muscles in your shoulder would be contracting and probably wouldn't be working, so they would need work to, get that moving again, because there's supposed to be an arm there which they're supposed to be supporting. So is it stuff like that?
Big time.
Yep.
So like you've seen me, I get the ankle strap and I strap it onto the stump and I do all kinds of different motions. So I've actually whenever I see a person, they're kind of very impressed, because although my stump gets a battering from it, which it's always going to.
Yeah.
I've managed to develop everything quite well.
Yeah. Just let me jump in here. I think I train pretty hard at the gym, right? And I generally think to myself, if I can be the hardest trainer in here, then I can generally, I can be the fittest person, right? And to be the fittest person, I need to be the hardest trainer at the gym. And I generally think to myself that I'm the hardest trainer at my gym in the hours that I go. And then you walk in and I'm not. And like even with one arm, some of the shit that you do in the gym is fucking incredible. Some of the stuff that you lift, and people just got to go to your Instagram page to be able to see that.
Yeah.
And then on the same aspect, you have people that are too lazy to go to the gym, and you just think, fucking hell, like put yourself in this guy's shoes. But look, I just wanted to get that out, man. It is incredible what you do at the gym. With your restrictions you've always been a pretty hard trainer like that?
Always.
Yeah.
I've always loved it. Before lifting weights in the gym, I never wanted to be a bodybuilder. I just wanted to be huge, basically. And I always had pride in working as hard as I can, going to failure, doing I'm just working like an animal in the gym. That's always been my MO. Yeah. Which is really lucky. Yeah. Because without that drive, I would probably be in a really, really bad spot now.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
But isn't that do you think you've got mentally tougher after your surgery?
Yep.
Yeah.
Definitely. I've definitely gotten
dealing with pain and stuff like that?
I think that itself has been the underlying growth, is that, not only the pain of having the arm chopped off, when I stopped taking painkillers, that the bone and the arm hurt. Mm-hmm. But I have really bad phantom pain constantly.
So what's phantom pain? I don't know what.
So phantom pain is basically... it's kind of changed a little bit over the time, but when I first woke up, I could feel an elbow at the end of my stump, a forearm and a hand, and they're all being crushed. Like the sensation of being crushed all the time. Like unbelievable amounts of pain.
Holy shit.
I can't believe, it's amazing what the human body can do in such high amounts of pain. So I think reframing that pain for me, and which is now, I've lost the elbow. The elbow's I don't have that sensation anymore. Now it's basically just a hand at the end of my stump.
So you can feel that.
I can feel the hand still, yeah.
Holy shit.
And I can't, if I try and move my hand, this hand at all, then it just feels like it's cramping up and it starts hurting way more.
Just like nerve receptors reacting or something like that?
Yeah, well, I guess, the human body's made to function with all four limbs for its whole life, and then when it gets chopped off, there's no system to go, okay, that's gone, now we can create new circuits.
For 26 years, it's had an arm, now it doesn't, and now the brain is probably still trying to, the receptors it's sending down to its hand is not getting there, which is causing the pain.
Yeah.
Wow.
Basically. So that pain was there, and this is kind of jumping around a little bit, but the first person that I met that had one arm, he had a paralyzed arm from a motorbike accident. He still had the phantom pain, and it was 20 years down the track. So after a few doctors telling me, it's only a year or so, you'll get rid of it, and I came to this realization that it's probably going to be there forever. Mm-hmm. And 3.5 years down the track, it's definitely still there.
Yeah.
So I think I've done a lot of philosophical thinking over this time, and a lot of that is basically surrounding the idea of pain. And, we all think that we should be comfortable. We think we shouldn't have pain. But like pain's a fact of life. And so, the general consensus is that pain is a negative thing. But I don't think it has to be a negative thing. Sometimes it fucking sucks.
Yeah, I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
But go on.
Yeah. And so now it's like, I have to, like I made this split choice. It's like, either live with pain and it's just part of your life. It's like breathing. Do you know what I mean? It's just like an up and down. Like there's no need for this pain to turn me into a drug addict because I want to take painkillers. Like I've always been scared of taking painkillers that stop this pain because I don't want to go down that path of having them forever.
And then relying on them.
Yeah.
And then becoming addicted to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I don't want relief from it.
So you would rather sit there and you would rather go through the pain.
Oh, absolutely.
That is pretty amazing, bro.
Thank you. Yeah. Well,
I reckon 99% of people would choose the path of non-pain, but someone like yourself saying that, no, I'd rather be present in the situation, and like look how tough it's made you, even in stuff with the gym, right? Stuff that you can do in there. Like fuck, if I lost an arm, I wouldn't be doing the shit you're doing in there.
Now I was listening to something. I think it might have been your last guest, and he was saying, people say that same thing to me. I don't know how they could have done it, but you never know until it happens.
Yeah.
And my best guess would be is that you would probably be doing the exact same thing I'm doing because you have that type A personality where you need to get going and get you running 60 Ks a week, you had a few days off because you were sick and sent you into a spiral.
Yeah.
And you're waiting to get something back going on. You improvise and you adapt.
Yeah. You are 100% correct. We were, just for reference, me and my friend were talking about people being put in situations because, we were both over in Afghanistan together and we were talking about tough situations over there and how 99% of people don't experience those situations, right? And a lot of people would react the way that we reacted, but they just never ever get put in those situations. So that's exactly what you're saying.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah. Look, I would probably agree with you there on that. And it's just people don't get put in those situations enough in their life.
No, they don't. And I know that I know a lot of people that wouldn't have been able to deal with it the way I did, which I'm grateful that it didn't happen to one of my friends that I don't think could have dealt with it the way I did.
Yeah.
But like, if it happened to any of your podcast guests, they've all got the same X factor to them.
Yeah, they do.
They probably all would have been able to get up and get going exactly I have.
Yeah, I'm trying to target the 1%ers.
Yeah, you're doing a great job.
And you definitely fall into that category.
Thank you.
Now, talking about my previous podcast guest, I'm going to get onto some questions for you that I've sort of pre-written out, and we've answered a few here. But to help my questions flow well together, sorry, not my questions, to help my podcast flow well together, the previous guest always has a question for the next guest. Now, my previous guest was a former paratrooper, combat veteran, deployment to Afghanistan in 2012. His name's Ryan Fox. Very good episode, last episode, if anyone wants to go back and listen to it. But, he wants to know, and we had one of our guys overseas stepped on an IED and lost both his legs. His name's his name's Curtis McGrath. We used to call him Kiwi. But he's actually won the last 2 or 3 gold medals in rowing for the Paralympics. Crazy guy, and I'm actually hoping to have him on this podcast after France.
Yeah.
He goes over there hopefully later in the year. But Ryan's sort of question was that if he lost a limb overseas, he would have probably rather died overseas. Which is a very, very harsh reality of it, you know what I mean? He would probably rather have the ultimate sacrifice and rather come back with one leg. Now, he wants to know, has this sort of arm affected your relationship life? And like, do you get, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, and like, do you get sort of treated differently when you're out and stuff like that? Do people see it and you can tell they're a bit different with you?
Yeah. So there's so many different facets to this question. So I suppose like out and about, because previously I'd always been so obsessed with the way I look and wanting to be big, and then losing all this weight and then having this one arm, like I was petrified of going out into public because people stare. And it's not, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. This is human nature, isn't it? You've got two arms. Everyone I know has got two arms. So you see someone with one arm, it's like, that's a bit of a spectacle. Like, I'm going to have a look.
Yeah, well, that's what actually made me come to you in the gym and say, hey, can you tell me your story?
Yeah.
And that's how I got you on this podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, you know, like, I know other people in the similar situation, they hate it when people ask them, like, it's a no-no. Like, don't ask them. But, like, I would rather just address the elephant in the room. Right? But this was quite difficult. So I went back to the gym. The first couple of things I did to start with is I went back to the gym, straight to the preacher bench where I snapped my bicep. And this took me 4 or 5 times going into my car crying, coming back in and trying to do it with my left arm, doing a preacher curl on the same thing.
Just because you had that memory of it?
Because I knew that, you know, if you let things like that lie, then they can creep up and really impact the rest of your life.
You probably had a bit of PTSD massively from that preacher curl.
Big time. Yeah. And I just needed to give myself that exposure therapy, like as hard and as fast as I could. And then the next step was going into the city, you know, and because everyone's staring at me, going into the city and just walking around. Again, same thing. Into the car, have a cry, get up, bit of self-talk, don't be like this, get up, get going, we're good to go. And so that... In everyday life, the way that people treated me differently, people were a little bit kinder to me, you know, especially going from a big kind of
intimidating
looking,
you know. Can say it, it's all right.
Yeah. Big, intimidating. That lots of people wouldn't want to approach and people would kind of avoid and whatever. And now it was to the point now where people were kind of asking me if I needed help and being very soft and nice and kind to me, which I fucking hated. Yeah. Like, you know, the friendliness is nice, but like that feeling that someone might see me and think I need help really bothered me.
Yeah. Yeah, because you sort of strike me as the type of person that has just taken care of themselves their whole life. Yeah. Right, you don't need no help from no one. No. And now you're getting to this stage where people are being overly polite to you and it's different. Yeah. Wow.
Like I want to be independent forever. I don't want to have to rely on anyone doing anything for me. That's scary. But I suppose then the other part of that is that with people of the opposite sex, which I think is where Foxy was really getting at to start with, is that I had lost beforehand. I had chockers full of mojo, right? Yeah. Gift of the gab, could talk, whatever. Yeah. And then I lost that ability completely. And I don't know, and I don't think it had anything to do with my appearance, but it was how I felt about it. Yeah. And so I've seen this change over, like, you know, I might be talking to some people, like over the years, and talking to some girls and just having conversations with them, like friendly conversations, and not having any idea that they had any interest because I was so consumed by this idea that I was disabled and that they wouldn't be able to see past it.
Yeah. Do you think that you almost lost a bit of your identity when you lost your arm? And then have you had to go through a rebuild process with your identity?
Yeah.
On that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Almost change the type of person that not sort of, I'm trying to get to your identity as a person, not changing as the type of person you are, but changing that identity of yourself. Have you had to rebuild that?
A little bit, yeah. And I suppose it comes like, you know, and this is jumping around again in terms of identity, my sport, right? Coming out, I pretty much very quickly took up cycling. And I wanted to be a track cyclist, but my coach at the time wanted me to be a road cyclist and be an endurance cyclist. And I've spent my whole life being huge. And so being an endurance cyclist of trying to drop weight down and do this, like I was a fish out of water, and it was the worst thing for my head because I was actively trying not to get bigger when I'd spent my whole life trying to get big. And especially because my recovery was trying to put muscle back on, and then I stepped into this sport and they're like, oh, now you got to strip it back off. But it wasn't until I made a jump, one of the Australian coaches said to me, well, you know, I've seen you around, I've seen you get the commitment, but how about you try sprinting instead, which is what I always wanted to do.
Right down your alley, like high explosive type stuff. You know, you have to have muscle on you.
Yeah. And that was like, that for me, in terms of my identity, was the most crucial turning point in my recovery, full stop. Because I've now gone from a sport where I know nothing. I don't know the language. I don't know, like I've never ridden a bike on the road. Like I think it's crazy dangerous. I'm not interested in it. To a sport where lifting weights is one of the main components. So I've gone from having nothing to going into a sport, a similar sport, but the same sport that I actually have something to bring to the table. And lifting weights was there and I could start putting muscle on and that as my identity, I kind of really got a piece of myself back, which I was really lost for a long time.
Yeah. Awesome. Let's stay on this. I want to know how you got into it. How did you get into cycling and you know, was it a part, like did someone suggest it to you as rehab or?
No, they didn't actually. One of my best mates called me up. I don't remember this conversation, but he reckons a couple of days after I woke up, he spoke to me on the phone and I said, I want to try track cycling, which is weird because you couldn't have paid me to put Lycra on before the amputation, like not a chance. And I had been exposed to it when I was young. One of my young friends, his dad used to race at the velodrome, watched a couple of races there. So it wasn't at the forefront of my thinking. And then I had this idea I was going to go try maybe rowing I had no idea what was on offer for para-athletes, right? Except I knew that I wanted to compete as a para-athlete.
Yeah.
And basically what drew me to it was the coach at the time. I spoke to Cycling Australia and she said, look, there's a coach at the moment that looks after the para-athletes. His name's Loz and he suffered an injury and his right arm is paralysed basically. And so this bloke, I went to go meet him at the velodrome, rode a bike around with one arm, super sketchy and doing a few things and the smell and the environment, the atmosphere, I kind of fell in love with it. But more than anything, him be like, this is so rare that I don't know people that have the use of only one arm in my day-to-day life, but like only him. And to be able to see this man who could do things around his house, he's got a workshop, he works on cars, works on bikes, does everything himself. Like there's no pity that he just gets around it. And that was the most powerful thing for me.
Showed you a bit of light at the end of the tunnel, like, hey, this guy's doing it.
Yeah.
I can do it as well.
Basically, it was the first version of like, shit, I'm not going to be a dependent to someone having to come in and do things for me because it can be done. And so more or less that's what kind of drove me into cycling. And I went into it and I was doing endurance and I knew I wasn't built for endurance, but I was willing to go hell for leather at it until I got good, until there was a better suggestion put by one of the other coaches.
Yeah. And so you mentioned before that you want to obviously compete in the Paralympics. What's the road like towards that? Obviously, you've missed this Paralympics going on. So what's the road like for 2028?
Well, 2028 is in LA.
Yeah.
We had an interesting this year for the Paralympics. We didn't get as many spots as we did last year. The point systems as to how countries qualify their athletes is a little bit strange at the moment. So, for instance, we got, I think, 4 male spots and 5 female spots in cycling. So I'm a track cyclist, but cycling in paracycling, they give the points out across all cycling disciplines.
Oh, okay.
And there's many, many more points to be had in road cycling because there's many more races. And so as compared to last cycle, we got 7 men, 6 women. Now we've got 4 men, 5 women. You know, France have got 11 men. Anyway, I'm going off topic, but so what you have to do, I'm doing a trial next week, which I'm hoping, I'm not really sure what the outcome of that looks like, but Sassy are keen to, see if I'm fast enough and give me some help.
Yep.
Whether that's a training agreement or a scholarship, I'm not sure.
What's Sassy?
Oh, South Australian Sports Institute.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So the state institute. The road is kind of, you have to incrementally chip away at everything. And, I was...
Obviously, like there's qualifying heats, there's and stuff like that you have to continuously go to and tick the right boxes there. Is that, I'm assuming that's what it is?
Times usually.
Yeah.
So my event is the 1 kilometre time trial, and the times are set out very clearly as to what categorisation you are.
Yeah, okay. And is your times dictated off your... Like, so if someone, like say someone has a more of a disability than you, do the times change in terms of that?
So there's, on a single bike, there's 5 categories of disability, and it's C1 to 5.
So they are categorised?
Yeah. So C1 will be, I know one C1, and she has really serious cerebral palsy, and like watching her ride a bike is... one of the most inspirational things you ever see. She's a nutter, and mad respect for her.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then up to a C5, which is myself. So I'm the least level of impairment. Probably the fact that the whole arm's missing, I'm maybe on the upper end of that level of impairment.
Yeah.
But I kind of like that because it can all get a little bit messy. The system for who is where and who's competing against what. And, if you go down a level, then you wind up being more competitive.
Yeah. And so how do you ride a bike with one arm? Is there did you have a synthetic arm, or not a synthetic, like
prosthetic.
A prosthetic arm that you put on?
Yeah. So that's like a kind of long, crazy story as well. But so I started off riding on the road. My coach had literally welded a seat post and a piece of foam on top of it so I could just sit it on top just so I can square myself up on the bike. I didn't really know how to ride a bike. Riding down Norton's Summit, taking it off, grabbing the frame with my knees and just holding on hell for leather.
That's crazy.
That was scary as fuck. Right. And then doing crits, like 1K loops in groups of 30, 40 blokes with that same setup and no control. I did some of them too. Scout wasn't fit enough, luckily, because if I was in the mid-pack, I probably would have died. And then moving over to the sprinting was when I really started thinking about prosthetics. So we made a prosthetic based on what one of the overseas guys use. And it was all working well, but then the problem is that there was a bit of a question mark. One of the main rules for a prosthetic is that if you come off your bike, the prosthetic has to detach from the bike at the same time. And so what I was working well and I was kind of using it quite well, but when I fell off, my arm was still attached to the bike. Now, I know someone else used this. I don't know how they get around that. I don't know what the loophole is, but I wasn't willing to gamble on the loophole. And the other thing is that at speed, your aerodynamics are really, really important in the velodrome. So I had a fixed elbow, which kind of had my back on a 45-degree angle. So I was a bit of a wind sail.
Yeah.
So there was no way I was really going to have a competitive time like that.
Yep.
And so I met this guy who used to work for the RAF doing helicopter blades, and he's just like a composites engineer mastermind.
Real lateral thinker.
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
And just so lucky I bumped into him, introduced through a friend of mine actually, and he's just invested so much time and thought into this arm for me. And we have built, as far as I know, one of the Australian coaches told me, I put this idea to him and he said, well, it's never been done before. There's probably a reason why it hasn't been done before. And so what we've wound up is we've got a moving elbow in the prosthetic, when you get out of the gate, when you take off to start with, your bike stationary and you have to throw all your weight forward.
Yeah, this is like I've seen, and they're really lunging and they're just putting everything into the first 5 or 6 pedals, aren't they?
Yep. And so to be able to get a prosthetic that can do that with a straight arm, I haven't seen it done before, right? But then the other part of it is that once I'm done, I'm up speed, pedaling out of the saddle, I can sit down and the elbow fold into flexion so I'm actually...
And then you can get down from the draft.
And then I'm properly aerodynamic.
Yeah, so you're not sailing and you're doing what normal sprinters do and they're crouched down. Yeah. So this would obviously decrease your force against the air and increase your speed.
Yeah, my coefficient of drag is significantly lower now.
Yeah.
And my ability to get out of the gate and the technique is much better. So it's a first of its kind, and that's really exciting. I've just got to get some results with it.
Yeah, nice. What type of what are you sort of riding in terms of times? Like, are you at a very competitive level that you would be able to compete at the Paralympics?
No,
not yet.
No. Last year, I got COVID. And my heart rate went to shit, basically. At 125 beats per minute, I lost 60% of my power, and it didn't move at all for that entire time, basically. And that was on the back end of a nationals where I was 10th off qualifying for the Australian team. Mm-hmm. Right, so I'm slowly watching my fitness slip away, and I was still in the gym, and then in that time, because there was more of a gym focus, I got a tendinopathy of my right quad insert, which meant I had to stop squatting and moving real load. And so by the time all this resolved, I effectively lost the whole year, didn't have any strength left in my legs, no fitness, struggling to walk up the hill with my dog.
Yeah.
So it's been very much a building process again. Working hard but patiently.
Yeah, it's going to be a long grind, isn't it, to 2028?
But I love it. I love the training.
That's good.
I love the journey so much.
I was just about to say that. I'm going to ask you a question in a few minutes about what you would tell your 18-year-old self, and we will get to it. But a lot of my guests on here, when I ask them that question, is what I would tell my 18-year-old self, enjoy the journey. Don't get too hung up by results and just enjoy the ride. And these are guys that have, professional athletes, really high-performing military guys as well. They all seem to have a very, very similar type of response to that question.
Yeah, okay.
And it's probably the exact same thing you just said then. Like, you've now got a target for 4 years, but maybe you do make it to the Paralympics and you get there and you love it, but the real part about it is the 4 years getting there and the 4 years grind to there.
And I'll probably want another 4 years after that.
Yeah,
to be honest.
And then enjoying it along the time and just hitting little personal milestones, little goals, stuff like that. And also the hard times. There's going to be shit times there where you're like, fuck, I'm not feeling well this week. I haven't hit my times well, but also enjoying them times as well. Because
sport's full of heartbreak.
Yeah.
And enjoying those times is really difficult, and I have struggled with that so far.
Yeah.
And I think that hopefully that's a skill I learn a little bit better. The idea of feedback is, was a quote from somewhere, I don't know where I heard it. The idea of feedback is to educate your future self and not to shame your past self. And that's kind of a quote that rings true to me, but I'm still trying to embody it in my life.
Yeah, I love that quote. That. Have you been someone that's always struggled to take on feedback, like constructive criticism?
A little bit, yeah. Yeah. I've always kind of.
Do you think that came from a younger self?
My younger self always thought he knew better than everyone else, and I've always had that kind of attitude. I just know better.
Like a bit of chip on your shoulder.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah, my last guest said that if he were to go back to 18-year-old self and tell himself one thing, it would be get that chip off your shoulder. You don't need it.
I did hear that, but I can imagine his 18-year-old self would have told him to fuck off.
Definitely. All right. Well, we're going to roll with that question for you. And this is a question I love asking my podcast guests. I've had, Brownlow medalists, AFL captains, triathletes, both in Ironmans, both in the surf lifesaving world, and then obviously in the triathlon world as well, and ex-military guys that I have huge respect for. So if you were to give yourself one bit of advice, 18-year-old self, what would it be about life?
Well, similar to your last guest in that I wouldn't bother trying to tell my 18-year-old self not to do anything, because, again, he probably would have told me to fuck off. But what I would say is, I've always been a bit of a philosophical thinker, so if I can put it in a less specific term for myself, I would have said two things, actually. And one would be to always tell the people you love that you love them and take pictures with them because you might not have them forever. And one of my biggest regrets is not having the pictures of my friends that have died and not having this time and letting them know how I feel about them. So I think that's really important. And then on the other side of training, and what's really important to me is that I would say that nothing comes quickly, and things that do come quickly can also go very quickly. And to work hard, work patiently, and not expect to be anywhere unless you're training properly for over a matter of years. It's not months, it's not weeks, it's many, many years. And that's how you get good at something, and that's how you build something sustainable. And I think that's something that 18-year-old me probably should have heard. Yeah.
Yeah, I wish we were around to tell ourselves then.
I was thinking about it. It's like, fucking.
But that's also a part of learning in life. You know, like you have to go through this young adolescent stage where you think you know everything. And I was a fucking brutal 18-year-old and 19-year-old and 20-year-old. My formative years were in the military. That's where I grew up. Yeah, and I grew up around tough older guys. Like going to my unit, we talked about it on the last podcast. Genuinely scared of people when you rocked up to the unit. It was a bully mentality, and that's where I grew up. And shit, I would love to tell myself a whole bunch of stuff, but yeah, it's a brilliant question to ask my podcast guests because it just gives you such an insight into who they are now and then who they were. Yeah. And how far you've come as well from, that 18-year-old self to yourself now, and looking back. And it's easily my favorite question to ask everyone at the, getting to the wrapping up of each podcast.
I did spend quite a lot of time thinking about it, actually. I wrote quite a few draft answers to that question.
Yeah. Well, you hit the nail on the head, mate.
Thank you.
That's my dogs barking, so they're probably ready for us to wrap this up. But and like I said at the start of halfway through this podcast, because that's when we got to the question. So you have to have a question for my next guest. My next guest is how do I introduce him without giving him away? He was a scout for an AFL club for years and years, and then he went into the management side of AFL clubs, a couple in Melbourne, and now he's back in Adelaide after a long stint over in Melbourne, quite a successful stint, to the CEO of a SNFL club. He has a very good AFL career as well. Not AFL, a very good SNFL career, and a bit of a management guru in terms of that footy side of things. So what would be your question to him?
So my question for him would be, he's obviously been a top dog through most of his professional career, right? And I wonder, did that extend to his childhood? Was he always kind of a leader, dominant leader growing up? Yeah. And if so, how did that change for him? Did he maintain that top dog dominant kind of way of living outside of his professional career, or did it change? Did it take on a different beast? I would be really interested to hear that.
Yeah, when he got into the management of AFL clubs. Yeah. Did he have to change it all as a person from when he was younger? Yeah. Is that what you're trying to say? Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question, man. Yeah. Very good question. You. Very good question. Well, look, mate, I'm very, especially the life I've lived. I don't want to boast or brag or anything, but I think I've lived a pretty decent life in terms of the people I've surrounded myself with and some of the people I know. But I am rarely left for words upon how driven someone is and how mentally mentally driving they can be. And this podcast has humbled me very, very much, mate. So thanks for coming on. Thanks for really grounding me. You have, and it was absolutely brilliant. And I thank you a lot. And look, mate, hopefully I can have you back on in a year or two, and let's chat your cycling and see how that's going.
I should be wearing some green and gold by then. But on that note, actually, I really, really appreciate the opportunity to come in here, and I have a lot of respect for you, and for you to say things nice like that about me is very, very good for me.
Yeah, you're welcome,
the people that you've had on here are all exceptional human beings. You're an exceptional human being, and I'm honoured to be a part of it.
Thanks,
man. Thank you very much.
Nah, good on you. And until next time.
Absolutely.
Take care, buddy.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And for more information, head over to our Instagram at 2 Worlds Collide Podcast. Take care.